Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kara with the Ohio LTAP Center at ODOT, and I'll be your host today. We are moving into session 2 of our series on MUTCD updates, and we're very happy to have Kevin Fiant back with us. Just a few quick reminders to help you to get the most out of today. If you have questions for Kevin, please drop them in the questions panel. We'll be monitoring those questions throughout the session and either answering them individually with the person that asked them or address them during our Q&A at the end. For any technical issues, please use the chat panel and our team will jump in to help. Also, keep in mind that we are recording this session. You'll get a link to the video afterward, as well as a link to the PDF handout. If you want to follow along with the slides, you can also grab the PDF handout right now in the Handouts pane. With that, let's get into it. Kevin, the virtual floor is yours.
All right, Kara, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Kara, you hear me?
I hear you well, thank you.
All right, great. Well, we have a lot to get through today, so we're going to jump in. There's maybe some people filtering in here, which is okay, and because the first few slides are kind of some review stuff anyhow, but we are going to jump right in because we got a lot to get through. Just real quick, again, my name is Kevin Fiant. I just kind of, the cue that I give to people to remember how to pronounce it is just like a giant, but with an F instead of the G. So, and I'm pretty tall, so that works pretty good. So, but anyhow, a little bit about myself. Again, I'm with Office of Roadway Engineering here at ODOT, have been at the Office of Roadway Engineering now for 4+ years, and at ODOT overall for over 25 years now. The previous to the Office of Roadway Engineering, I was up at the District 6 office doing a variety of things. So, definitely had lots of opportunities back at District 6 and certainly now in my role here to be involved with, taking a look at the MUTCD and figuring out, applications or issues related. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of, the past District 6, hands-on experience, as well as just kind of getting everybody up to speed on some of the changes that we have with the MUTCD. So we will jump in here and see if I can, there we go. All right, so as far as some housekeeping things, and Kara already talked a little bit about that, but just want to kind of reiterate that, throughout the session, please just, any questions that you might have, throw those into the question box. And we've got a team here that's we'll be able to look those over and do some research on those to get answers. So, just a reminder there, make sure to throw those questions in the question box. If we can answer them as we go, we'll put the questions out there. If not, towards the end of the session or at the end of the session, we will go through questions. And if we can't answer a question, we would get that information out after the session. Also just want to let everybody know, so this is obviously a pretty long session, so we've got set up, we're planning for 2 breaks during this, so roughly about an hour, 2 hours in. So just want to let everybody know about that as well. Moving on to talk a little bit about the agenda for today. So the first few slides, again, are going to be some overview stuff if you happen to sit in on the session 1 training session. So we'll go just a quick overview of the Ohio Supplement and the MUTCD and kind of how to use that. And then the majority of this session will be focusing on the part 2 and part 3, part 2 being signs, part 3 being markings. Some session goals. So the idea here is to show the folks that are on this session, how the Ohio Supplement and MUTCD are used together to make the OMUTCD. And also, we want to highlight some specific Ohio-specific language and also point out some of the changes from the previous manual. And again, we will be doing an overview of parts 2 and 3 as part of this session. So with that, also, I want to hit on a couple things that we are not going to be able to do with this session. I mean, we're certainly not going to be able to talk about or address every last change throughout this whole entire couple of sessions or couple of sections of or parts of the manual. There's 1,162 pages in the national MUTCD and then another 174 pages in the Ohio Supplement. So it's just not feasible to get through all of that material. So hopefully you weren't expecting that, because that would be a real speed reading session. But what I did want to point out, so if you are interested in other, in all of the changes from the previous national MUTCD to the current one, there is a red line version out there, the link's in the slide here, and then there's also a summary of dispositions. So during the comment period, questions, comments that were posed, there are responses to those comments. So both of those are really good references to check out. So jumping in here, the OMUTCD previously was a complete standalone document. And I provided a link to that old document here in the slide. What we've transitioned to this time is that our OMUTCD now consists of the national MUTCD plus an Ohio Supplement. So, we have changed our approach a little bit with this release. And again, there is a link there for folks to jump to our supplement page. We are going to hit on that here in just a few moments as well further. So this slide, I just wanted to show, again, previously here on the left side of the slide, the cover of our previous manual, the 2012 edition of the OMUTCD. And then on the right-hand side, the combination of the two documents, the two covers of the documents shown there, that now makes up our new OMUTCD. And also just real quick, want to point out the revision 1 of the national MUTCD was recently released, and actually it's in my next slide here as well, a little bit bigger view of that. So in early March of this year, so not even a month ago, there was the first revision release of the national MUTCD. So just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, and also make sure that, with our new model of using both national MUTCD and Ohio Supplement, that it's important for users to make sure to pull up the information on the national MUTCD, the most current. So in this case, we're talking about revision 1. This slide, just want to hit on this real quick. This is just a breakdown of all of the different parts of the MUTCD. Part 1 we talked about already previously in session 1. Today we're going to be talking about parts 2 and 3. Coming up in our next session, we're going to be talking about part 4 and part 5. And also just want to note, as another reminder, part 5 of all of the parts of the MUTCD, part 5 is the only one that basically the content completely changed. Previously it was low volume traffic control devices for low volume roads. That has completely gone away, and now part 5 is traffic control considerations for automated vehicles. So the content for the low volume roads, that has been kind of spread out throughout all of the applicable sections say if it was markings related, it would have been moved to part 3. If it's sign related, part 2, etc. As far as moving on here, part 6 of the manual, that's our temporary traffic control, and that's going to be covered in session 4 of the LTAP training sessions. And then part 7, that's school areas. Part 8 is our rail and grade crossings. That's actually going to be covered in session 3. And then part 9 is bike facilities. So part 7 and 9 are going to be our last session in this series of LTAP trainings. So moving on, just want to talk again real quick about how to use this new format, an MUTCD and the Ohio Supplement. And really, I mean, it's, yes, we understand it's 2 documents instead of 1, but we wanted to try to make it as user-friendly as we could under those circumstances. So, basically what a user needs to do is determine what part and section of the national MUTCD content they're interested in. Then they need to go take a look at the Ohio Supplement table of contents. If that particular part and section is in the Ohio Supplement, then you want to use the Ohio Supplement document. And I want to stress that we purposely made sure that the whole entire section was pulled over to the Ohio Supplement if there was any Ohio specific content in there, just so that users weren't having to constantly go back and forth between documents. So now I'm going to jump to a quick view of the web page for our Ohio Supplement document, kind of show you around there a little bit. Let's see if we can get to that. All right, can everybody see that okay? Just pulled the web page in. Okay, great. So again, this is our home page or landing page for our Ohio Supplement. Just kind of the way this is laid out, so on the right-hand side here, and this view may vary if you're looking at it on a mobile device. This may actually end up towards the bottom, but you've got links here to both the Ohio Supplement document and also a link to the National MUTCD website, so you can get to both of those documents directly from this page. This portion of the page just kind of covers the background information, the legal authority, etc., on our use of the OMUTCD and our transition to this new model of 2 documents instead of 1. And then again, towards the bottom of this, there's again the same links that take you to both of those pages. Also, with that recent revision of the national MUTCD, we just added a little bit of background information on that release. There's a link to the rulemaking docket where you can get much more detailed information. And then just at the very bottom, again, just kind of a refresher on how to use the 2 documents together. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the landing page, and we'll jump back into the slides here. All right, so moving on. So again, just a quick review, and this is some stuff that we covered in the last session, but I think this is pretty important information, so wanted to hit on this again. Talking about compliance of devices, and this comes from part 1 of the MUTCD, and specifically there's some information in 1B03, but what I wanted to point out here on this slide is, actually I'll just kind of highlight it here, but what I've got highlighted and with the pointer here, this want to make sure that everybody understands that the majority of traffic control devices, if there have been changes to those traffic control devices, say a sign changed or there's a different marking layout or something like that, as long as there is not a target compliance date, the intent is that those devices are swapped out at, by the end of the service life of those devices. So in other words, you don't have to immediately go rushing out and replace traffic control devices, signs, etc., that don't meet the requirements. That can be done, and it needs to be done, needs to be planned for throughout the life of those signs, either, the next time you go out for a maintenance of that stretch of road, or if you have a project coming up for that particular stretch of road, then you need to be making sure to incorporate that new information. And also here's just a link to the FHWA FAQ page. This is just one of the FAQs out there. There's a lot of other good information out there to check that out. Also, as a review, and probably one of the most important things that you can take away from any of these sessions that we're going to be doing is these target compliance dates. So this table here, and it's not a very big table. There's 6 rows here. These are the items that have specific dates tied to them to make sure that the traffic control devices or the issues being described are being addressed, within that time frame here. And these ones that are highlighted pink here, we're going to touch on those in a lot more detail later on in today's session, because they're part of parts 2 and 3 here. And moving on, again, just to reiterate, if you weren't able to jump on training session 1, I believe it is going to be offered later this year, as just a recorded webinar type of a session. So keep your eyes out on the LTAP webpage for information on that coming up, in case you missed it and you wanted to go back and check that information out. It's a much deeper dive into part 1 and just all of the background information on the manual itself. So before we jump into the real meat and potatoes of what we got for today, just want to let you all know that throughout this refresh of the national MUTCD, if you think about it, the last time it was published, it was 2009, and the new publication of the national manual was 2024. So a lot of time between those two. When they republished, there was a lot of time spent going through that information and reorganizing it in a way that, in our opinion, going through it and kind of analyzing it and looking things over, it makes a lot of sense. They tried to group things together logically, but I guess I just want to make everybody aware that if you're used to how the previous manual is laid out, there's most of that same information still there. It's just in a lot of cases it's maybe been moved to a different location. So just kind of keep that in mind as you get into the new manual. So this slide, just want to talk real quick, about part 2 in particular. We're going to jump into that first, and that's going to be the majority of the talk today. But the organization of part 2, so it's set up with several chapters, and then each of those chapters, or most of those chapters at least, not all, but most, have several subcategories or subchapters below them. So we're going to we're going to go through just kind of, in order, all the different chapters of the manual, and at least I'm going to at least show you that information. We're not going to have slides on each and every one. That would just be too much. But anyhow, I just want to kind of reiterate and show how the MUTCD is organized. Moving into the actual sections themselves. So in section 2A01, this is just kind of your foundational information. What I have highlighted here just is just kind of a emphasis on, permanent signs not being used to confirm rules of the road or statutes, that type of thing. That's just not really the intent of signage. It seems like that sometimes that does crop up out in the field, but that's not the intent. Section 2A02 of the manuals gets into the standardization of applications. And really the thing here that I wanted to emphasize is, and what's highlighted here, I'll just kind of paraphrase, is that all the necessary signs and other traffic control devices need to be in place prior to opening a roadway for public travel. So that's the key takeaway from this section, and nothing that's not really new from the previous manual. Next slide here. This one just looks at the classification of signs. So, and I color coded here with the highlighting. So you've got basically 3 categories or classifications of signs. You got your regulatory signs, so that's your stop signs, yield, that type of thing, speed limit signs. You've got your warning signs, so those are typically your black on yellow or black on fluorescent yellow green for school areas. And then you also have the third major component is your guide signs. So those, giving you destination information, directions, distance information to particular points of interest, that type of thing. Moving on, section 2A04. So this gets into the design of signs, and a couple things I wanted to point out here in this section. Paragraph 18 that I've got on the slide here and highlighted some of the information. One thing that's new, it's more restrictive. It's not new. There was information in the previous manual about this, but it's definitely become more restrictive regarding the use of telephone numbers, website URLs, that type of thing on signage. Basically, it boils down to there's a very limited number of signs. There's only a small handful actually that are in the manual that have phone number information in them. And so, if there are other, we had some Ohio specific signs that had phone number information. So we've had to kind of do away with those signs. We're working through getting rid of, reviewing all of those to make sure that they don't have that phone number information, because at the end of the day, we don't want the distracted driving, that type of thing. So that was the emphasis area. All right, moving on. Another part of that same design of signs section 2A04. Another thing just to point out real quick, pictographs are covered in that section, and with the manual, the emphasis is you just need to be careful with the use of pictographs. You need to make sure you're reviewing this information if that's something that you're trying to do that's not a pictograph that's already on one of the standard signs that are provided in the manual. Just need to be careful of that. Next section looks at shapes of the signs, and you've got your stop sign, yield. They're all very unique, standardized shapes. And really the key thing here, wanted to point out, and I highlighted a little bit of the text associated with that, is it's very important when you're talking stop signs, yield signs, these crossbucks, rail crossings, you need to make sure that you're not putting any signage on the backside facing the other direction that obscures the shape of those signs, because those are, stop signs are so, users just recognize them just from the shape, and we need to make sure that just to save a little bit of a post or whatnot, to put a sign facing the other direction, that you're not obscuring the shape of that sign. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. The colors of signs. So this section 2A06 just gets into all the different colors that are designated for the different types. Not going to dive deep here, but this is just, I pulled this back in. This was in part 1, and it's just a good refresher just to kind of show everyone all the different colors and how they've been assigned for different uses. This slide, again, just talking about the dimensions of your signs. And again, this gets into, it's very dependent obviously on the type of facility that you're talking about. We'll take a closer look at some of the tables. There's tables in most chapters that list out the different size requirements, which is a really handy resource as far as determining the size required for the type of road that you're planning to put that particular sign on. Next section that we're going to talk briefly about, word messages, and that's section 2A08. And I mean, really nothing, too earth-shattering here. It's pretty common sense type information, that your word messages, need to be horizontal, reading left to right. And then the thing I thought was kind of interesting, and I'd never even really heard of this word, but solidus, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it right, but so, if you want to wow your friends and family, you can say that you know what a solidus, and maybe I'm not pronouncing it right, but you know what that is. It's a /. I always thought it was a /, but I guess it has a name. Moving on, want to talk a little bit about the symbols on signs, and what I got highlighted here. The text is what it's saying is that standard symbols typically oriented facing left. However, it is permissible to mirror image those symbols if it helps to convey the information to the road users. So the example I've got here on this slide, which is a pretty common one. You see this a fair amount if you're out and about at pedestrian crossings, just doing, so on the left side here, you've got the mirror image. On the right is your standard orientation. So it's just conveying, that the pedestrian traffic is actually walking out, into the crossing area. It's not, you don't have to do this, but it is an option and it is permissible to do this. Sign borders, just real quick, this section, again, it's your borders need to be the same color as the legend with the distinct shapes. And then as far as the corners, all signs, with the exception of stop signs, the corners are supposed to be rounded. Again, nothing here that's any kind of significant change from previous version of the manual. The section 2A11, so this gets into enhanced conspicuity for signs. And really the message here is, and if you dig deeper into this section, there's a lot of mention of, the use of engineering judgment. And, we talk in session 1 of the training, we talked a lot about, the differences between engineering study, engineering judgment. So that's kind of the key takeaway here. It's, if you start throwing enhanced conspicuity on practically every sign out there, you start to kind of lose the effectiveness. So you definitely want to give some thought when you're considering adding some of these additional items to make signs stand out, and you just want to make sure that you're doing it for the signs that would need it the most, and not just every last sign out there or a big portion of the signs. And just to talk a little further about enhanced conspicuity, just wanted to point out one change with the new manual that was not in the previous manual. So on the left-hand part of the slide is what the new manual requires, as far as if you're looking to provide conspicuity, you cannot provide the same sign on the same assembly. So that's what we did have previously in one of our standard drawings. So we've since corrected that, and so it's definitely not the appropriate way to provide conspicuity is to put two of the same signs on the same sign assembly. So again, that is a change from the previous manual. Next section here just talks a little bit about the use of LEDs for conspicuity. The info that I have highlighted here, and I throughout this presentation, I kind of pulled in some of the language from the MUTCD and or the Ohio Supplement. Obviously it would just take way too long to read through all that, and I don't, nobody wants to hear me drone through that anyways. But I did try to in some of these slides, highlight some of the things that I felt were key pieces of information, or at least talking points as we kind of go through this. And in this case here, just wanted to point out that if you are going to use LEDs for conspicuity, you want to make sure that the LEDs are all flashing simultaneously. You don't want some kind of sequential thing, as it goes around the sign or anything like that. And then there's also the flash rate is provided there for you as well. Next slide here, just want to take a look a little closer regarding that conspicuity. So this slide here is just showing an example of a sign that does not actually meet the conspicuity requirements. And in this particular case, the stop sign, what the manual is talking about, and I've got it highlighted below in the slide here, is that there needs to be an LED along each edge of the sign in addition to each of the corners. So in this case here, this stop sign would need some additional LEDs in between each of the corners to meet that requirement. And then just as a bonus, when I pulled this picture, it also has this regulatory cross traffic does not stop sign. That is no longer, that's not the correct sign as well. It needs to be a warning type cross traffic does not stop if that's intended to be used there. Let's see. Oh, and back to the previous slide there, just this is a good reminder, looking at this example. So if you're responsible for upkeep of signs, replacement projects, maintenance projects, that types of things on signs, this is a good example and an important point to make sure that you're not just kind of blindly going out there and replacing signs in kind. You need to make sure that you kind of you're checking to make sure that the appropriate signs are there. And like in this case, this needs to be the black on yellow warning sign instead of the black on white regulatory plaque that go with that. So it's just an important point to bring up. Moving on, in 2A03, this gets into the standardization of location. And what I highlighted here is, and this you're going to see very quickly that this is a theme throughout, but there is definitely concern and a lot of emphasis in the manual about overloading road users, or in other words, sign clutter out on our roadways. I mean, it's an emphasis area in several sections of the manual. So you're going to see it here and in several other locations. And it's definitely something to be thinking about as you're, working through signing, getting the signing out there on your particular routes. Here is just this slide. Just wanted to pull up these couple of figures, 2A 2A2 and 2A3 are really good examples just to kind of show location as far as vertical height as well as offset locations. So some good reference information there. And next section, next slide here, 2A14, talking about overhead sign installation. The manual gets into, there's not any standard language in this section necessarily, but there is some guidance information. And then there's also, this option paragraph 3 that kind of lists out many of the scenarios where overhead signs are beneficial. So just wanted to point that out to folks. Mounting height, we already looked at that a little bit, and it's presented pretty well in those figures that I provided in a previous slide there. But this, again, I pulled in a couple of those images from that figure just to illustrate, some of the different height requirements for the different signs depending on kind of where they're mounted and what, if it's a kind of a rural application or more of an urban application, that type of thing, and the mounting height requirements. Next, just real quick, going to look at the lateral offsets again. Those figures that we looked at a few slides ago do a really good job of kind of giving you all the basic information, and then this section, just throughout the text of this section dives much deeper into that. Did want to point out, the highlighted info I've got here talks about your post-mounted signs and object markers need to be crash worthy if they're within the clear zone. Very important. We want to keep these sign installations safe in case there is a crash where somebody were to get off of the roadway. And also just pointing out that our TC standard construction drawings, TC 4110 and 4120, show in more detail some of the ODOT requirements for your post and beam support type information. This slide here talking about the orientation of signs, and typically the typical orientations vertical. What I was trying to show here and what I highlighted in the text is you are allowed to slightly tilt your signage if that helps with the viewing angle. So in cases of steep upslope, steep downslope, and I pulled this picture. I drive this pretty regularly. It's I-77 down when you get into Virginia. I think it's near the Fancy Gap area. So there's a steep downslope. I don't know for a fact that these signs have been tilted to improve the viewing angle, but this will definitely be a application where you might be able to do something like that. So kind of our southeast Ohio, there's some areas where you got some pretty steep slopes that could be applicable. Moving on, just talking about posts and mounting, and again, what I highlighted on this slide is just kind of reiterating that point about making sure when you're getting your signs installed and your posts, any mountings, additional things going on those signs, just make sure that you're not obscuring, inadvertently obscuring, say, a stop sign, so that people can't see the actual shape of those signs, because that is very important information for drivers. Maintenance-wise, this section 2A19 gets into that. Really, the takeaway here is that all agencies that are responsible for signs need to be making sure and planning for the ongoing upkeep of not only the signs but all of the traffic control devices. So this just shows a couple of not so good traffic control devices as far as being maintained. They're pretty they've pretty faded or are obscured by vegetation, that type of thing. So it's important that, that resources be allocated to the ongoing maintenance of the different traffic control devices. Again, section 2A20, and again, like I said previously, this, will definitely be a theme. There's multiple slides and multiple sections of the MUTCD that get into this, but talking about excessive use of signs, and just kind of want to reiterate that previous section 2A13 gets into the priority of signs, and it talks about, recommendations for folks to prioritize the different types of signs, and to have some type of a process in place so that you can avoid getting into some of those sign clutter type issues. Next slide, looking at retro reflection and illumination. So in this slide, just want to point out ODOT, on ODOT projects, we now use retroreflective sheeting on all of our new sign installations. The actual MUTCD, or the OMUTCD, it allows either retroreflective sheeting or the use of sign lights. We used to do quite a bit of sign lights, but with the improvements with retroreflective sheeting, we have moved away from that entirely. Let's see, next slide here. Again, looking at the maintaining of the minimum retroreflectivity when it comes to signs and sign sheeting. So I just pulled up this table 2A5 and just wanted to point out, so the way this table's set up, and it was a little odd to me, but on the left column here is the different sign colors, and then over, let me highlight it. Over here is the different retroreflectivity requirements, and for whatever reason, they had plenty of space to not have to abbreviate, but they just put the first letter of the particular colors in there. So you got your white and your green. And then the other thing to point out here, something new with this manual, is there are now minimum requirements for your blue and your brown sheeting. So just wanted to point that out as well. And get back out of the pointer, and we'll keep moving here. Oh, and one other thing, this is a little bonus piece of info, and something maybe you can wow your friends and family with at your next cocktail party, but the unit of measure for retroreflectivity is candelas per lux per square meter. So if you want to wow, your spouse or your kids, hit them with that, and you might, they might tune you out completely. But anyhow, just a little tidbit of info there, and how that's measured, retroreflectivity, and at least in the case of signs, it's a different unit of measure when you talk about pavement markings. Moving on, just want to point out here, this slide's just covering quickly section 2A23, so it gets into median openings and the treatments associated. And really the key point here is that, it's not just a black and white question of the width of your median. You need to take a look at how the traffic's actually interacting in that median, and this section lays that out. And and actually it talks about, there's two pieces of criteria that need to be met if you're talking about signing and marking as a separate intersection, and those two are listed here on the slide in paragraph 1 there, A and B. So that's important to not just assume it's just a distance measurement and you move forward. You need to take a look at how the intersection is actually functioning. Moving on, so we're going to jump into Chapter 2B, and with this, I want to, this slide just want to kind of explain a little bit. So as we move into this chapter, what I'm going to be doing kind of for the remainder here is at the beginning of each chapter, there will be a slide that shows all of the sub-chapters or subcategories within that chapter. And if, excuse me, if there is content that, that will have a slide associated with it, those are going to be highlighted pink. And if there is a section that has, that is in the Ohio Supplement, that'll be highlighted yellow. And for every part of this session, that, every portion of parts 2 and 3 that are in the Ohio Supplement, there will be a specific slide that kind of digs a little deeper into that and shows what that is, and maybe, I'll also talk a little bit about the why that is. So moving on here, in section 2B02, so it gets into the design, and we're talking in this chapter 2B, we're talking regulatory signs. And, nothing too earth-shattering here, but I did just want to highlight and point out, that if you are incorporating any regulatory signs in changeable message signs, we definitely have that technology now to be able to display full signs in your changeable message boards. You need to make sure that if you're doing that, those signs are set up and sized appropriately. They need to meet whatever the typical sizing and shapes and colors for those signs need to be if you are using those on a message board type application. This slide here, and there's, like I say, there are several tables throughout the entire manual when it comes to signs that list out the different sizing requirements. So in this case, this is your different regulatory signs and the sizing requirements. So again, this is a really great reference resource if you're trying to determine the appropriate sign size for your particular project or, replacement, whatever it might be. And the other thing to point out here is that in the Ohio Supplement, we elected not to pull any of these tables over into the Ohio Supplement. So if there is any Ohio specific signs, that information, we talk about some of that information in the Ohio Supplement, but if you need the detailed sizing information, you would need to go and refer to our SDMM manual. And one other thing just to point out real quick here, and this, like I say, is sprinkled throughout the entire manual, but the low volume road information that used to be mostly in part 5 of the previous MUTCD, that has been moved, to the different sections that it applies. So in this case, talking about regulatory signs on low volume rural roads and some sizing requirements. So your section 2B04, so this is actually gets into a section that is in our Ohio Supplement. A couple things I wanted to point out about this particular section. So of all of the regulatory signs, stop signs is the one sign, I believe, in the manual that is not permitted to be part of a changeable message sign. That's new content added. Again, change some of the advanced changeable message signs were just kind of coming online back with the previous manual. So, so just be aware, stop signs are a no-go on changeable message signs. And then as far as the Ohio specific content that's in section 2B04, so what that has to do with is our ORC, Ohio Revised Code, has a section, and I reference it here in the slide, 4511, 43, that talks about, basically it restricts any kind of turn at a stop intersection. So the accept right turn plaque that the MUTCD talks about is just something that, based on Ohio law, doesn't work. So we took that section out of the Ohio Supplement. And also here, I just wanted to point out, this is also in the Ohio Supplement. Figure 2B-1 just shows that particular sign that is not applicable here in Ohio because of the Ohio Revised Code requirements. Moving on to your yield signs, and actually I misspoke there. So both stops and yields are not supposed to be displayed on the changeable message signs as far as regulatory goes. So it's those two types of signs. So I do apologize about that. And just to clarify, moving on, excuse me. So with this section, basically signing for right-of-way at intersections. In this section, I mean, this some pretty important information in here, so we're going to hit on this with basically slides for all of these. We'll probably move through these fairly quickly just to kind of keep things moving, but I do want to hit on them briefly. So as far as general considerations, the thing to point out here is in this paragraph 4, it lists off the different types of right-of-way control, and from least restrictive down to most restrictive. So as you're taking a look at your different unsignalized intersections, this kind of gives you the criteria to be taking a look at, and again, from least restrictive to most restrictive. 2B07, so this one talks about your determination of the minor road. I'm not going to read through all of this, but again, when you're looking at your unsignalized intersections and you're trying to determine your traffic control type, this is some of the information you need to go to. Similarly here, your right-of-way at your different intersection controls and the considerations. This is a partial list. It's an even bigger list that's in the actual manual when it gets into this topic of right-of-way at intersections. Next one talks about the use of no intersection control. And again, it's based upon engineering judgment, and this needs to be also based on some of these factors that are listed here on this slide. And again, not going to go through all of those just in the interest of time, but again, this section here does is definitely a portion of the manual that folks that get into this and determining traffic controls at intersections need to be aware of. This section here talks about your yield control, and again, most of these sections discuss the use of engineering judgment, and also here wanted to just point out real quickly that yield signs are not to be placed on all of the approaches to an intersection. I mean, the only exception to that is your roundabout type intersections. Here, minor roads, your minor road stop control, again, just pointing out, it kind of like a broken record here, but engineering judgment, that, I mean, the manual's, it's a very important consideration. Engineering judgment, needs to be part of your decision making. Your always stop control warrants, again, engineering judgment, just kind of feel like, you know, I'm just it's repeating itself, and it's definitely a theme throughout. And the other thing to point out here at the bottom that I included on this slide, and this is a standard requirement, that the satisfaction of all of these, any of these always stop control warrant or warrants shall not in itself require the installation of always stop control. So it's not an absolute. You know, again, there's still the need to exercise some engineering judgment. And then this section, 2B13 through 2B17, just kind of listed those off real quickly, and just wanted to point out that the new MUTCD does reorganize some of this information when it comes to these warrant criterias. So just be aware of that. Next section gets into stop and yield sign placement. And here, you know, again, it provides some of your standard information on the installation, you know, as to where they're supposed to be placed. And then, you know, also refers back as far as, you know, your height requirements, lateral offsets. You know, you would refer back to some of those sections that we previously looked at. And then a couple other things to point out, you know, this section provides some guidance, you know, on the use of stop or yield signs at stop lines, crosswalks, etc. Section 2B19. So this section is in the Ohio Supplement, and this section, you know, again, this one gets into Ohio is, as far as you know, between yielding or stopping in the interaction with pedestrians. Ohio, the way the law is written, Ohio is a yield state. Some states are stop, some states are yield. So what we did here is we just took out the mentions for the signs associated with the stop condition. So that was the purpose of this information being pulled over into the Ohio Supplement. And then this slide, again, this is just taking a look at 2B20, and again, similar to 2B19, this one's in the Ohio Supplement, and again, it's because of that differentiation, or how Ohio law addresses pedestrian right-of-way within crosswalks, etc. And then also showing on this slide is one of the figures that's also in the Ohio Supplement. It's just basically eliminating all of those signs that use the stop at the different type crossings. And with that, I believe, yes, we have come up on our first break of the session. So we're at 9:58. So how about, you know, take 5 minutes and get back going here shortly after 10, around 10:03 or so. So we will be back here very shortly. Okay, let's see, I've got 10:03 here on my end, and just in the interest of time, we'll keep rolling through this. If people are still out on their breaks, we can catch up and on this very soon here. But we're going to keep rolling. Let's see. Moving on. So we're getting into, we're remaining in Chapter 2B, but we're going to get into the section or subsection that gets into speed limit signs and plaques. And in this particular subsection, we have two sections that are part of the Ohio Supplement. So we're going to take a look at both of those. First, the speed limit signs. It is in the Ohio Supplement, and the supplement provides the info. It provides additional information and reference info to ORC and TEM processes to alter the statutory speed limit. So basically, the reasons that this is in the Ohio Supplement is just to provide that additional guidance, both reference and guidance to ORC and to our Part 12 of the TEM. Otherwise, there's no Ohio-specific changes there. On the next section that is in the Ohio Supplement 2B25, the reason it's in the supplement is it's, again, a big reason that the majority of these sections are over in Ohio Supplement is we had to go back and review the MUTCD content in relation to our Ohio Revised Code, and if there were some instances where Ohio Revised Code had some differences, we needed to address that. So in this case, the Ohio Revised Code just stipulates the higher penalties in construction zones, and we wanted to point that out in this section of the Ohio Supplement. So that's the reasoning for this particular section being in the supplement. Moving on to the next subcategory. You can hear me all right? Good. Okay. Movement and lane control signs. So got several again here that are in the Ohio Supplement. So we'll take a look at all of those, 2B27 through 2B30. And then we also are going to just take a quick look at the movement prohibition sign section, 2B26. So your movement prohibition signs, so these are your, restricted right turn or restriction, say during a particular time period. So just want to kind of pull those up. I mean, those are used regularly and provide some important information and context. So I just wanted to create a quick slide hitting on those, and then moving on into section 2B27. The reason this is in the Ohio Supplement, what I've got shown here below. So we struck out, there was some language under the guidance of this particular section that talks about these intersection lane control signs when they're mounted overhead, the potential placement of those at the projection of the lane. And that was an area that we've had some issues with. And so the reasoning we struck that out is to do away with that. And I have a slide here and coming up that's going to illustrate that a little bit better. Similar here, the same type of thing. We also want to clarify the prohibition of placing some of these types of lane control signs at the far side of the intersection. So kind of the same reasoning that this section's in the Ohio Supplement as that previous section. And this next slide will kind of illustrate that. So this, I'm not exactly sure of the intersection here, but I believe it's somewhere up in Northeast Ohio. But this, I mean, we're talking, you know, a divided highway here, and way on the opposite side of that intersection are some of the overhead lane assignment signs. I mean, it's just not, you know, and they're kind of squished together, and we felt like there was a lot of the information wasn't being, you know, users weren't able to pick up on those signs, and then they were sometimes being misinterpreted. So that's what we're talking about with the changes in the Ohio Supplement. Again, this section 2B29 just gets back into that again, you know, talking about mounting of these on the far side of the intersection. And then also in the Ohio Supplement 2B30, the change here, and it's in the Ohio Supplement, but only for the time being, because all we really did here was just change this out just to illustrate, you know, and this shows on the bottom of the slide down here that this R3-8 is actually a really large series of signs. And in Ohio, we actually went and created specific sign codes for many combinations of these lane control signs, you know, primarily just for the convenience of ordering and kind of keeping them inventoried, that type of thing. So we changed this to mention, you know, that it refers to the series. And something to point out here with the revision 1 of the National MUTCD, this section being part of the Ohio Supplement, that'll actually be going away. We'll be getting that updated because they actually made that change with their new revision. Moving on here to the section on passing, keep right, and slow traffic. Just one section I wanted to hit on here, 2B38. And also just to point out real quick, there is a new section here, 2B44. Just want to mention this is new to the manual. But in 2B38, you know, this is not Ohio Supplement information, but the reason I wanted to pull this up is that this section actually required us to go back and as part of this process, we had to work with our legal team and the legislative services folks, and you know, in reviewing Ohio Revised Code, there was some things in the manual that conflicted with a portion of the Ohio Revised Code. So this 4511.351, the use of the keep right except to pass signs, was previously in the Ohio Revised Code, but because of how the new manual explains the use of those signs, those were contradicting. So we had to go back and actually work through the process of removing that section out of the Ohio Revised Code. So it is no longer there. To find this, you'd have to go back to previous versions of the ORC. Moving on, going to talk some about selective exclusion signs, and then also move into the subsection that gets into your do not enter, wrong way, one way, etc. Signs and plaques. So we've got a handful of slides to hit on here. This slide talking about your selective exclusion. So really the point here is just want to point out that these selective exclusion signs, it's important that there is a state or local statute or ordinance that's in place before you go out and put these signs up. So in other words, you can't, you know, just by the act of placing some of these signs doesn't make these enforceable. And sometimes we do get that issue. We get that that question comes up from time to time. So I just wanted to point that out. Section 2B48, I put this section in here because it gets into the treatment of wrong way traffic control at your interchange ramps, and wanted to point out that we do have a ODOT standard construction drawing. It's our TC 7320 that provides a typical layout for the signing associated with that. And also just to point out that that standard construction drawing is it's not just, you don't use it at every last interchange. You need to exercise engineering judgment or an engineering study just to make sure that that is an appropriate location for those additional signs. Section 2B 49 and 50, again, just some of the other signs that this section covers. So you got your one-ways, your divided highways. Again, highlighted, this refers back to that section that talks about, how to determine, how you treat a divided highway, and with regard to the traffic controls, whether it's a single interchange or intersection or two independent intersections, depending on some of that criteria. Next section here, 2B51. So this gets into your roundabouts, circulation plaques. And the thing to point out here is that, so on the right-hand side, got a couple of signs up on the slide. The top sign, that's the sign, if you are going to use this circulation plaque, that's the one that needs to be used. This new manual has eliminated the use of these chevron signs in your center islands of roundabouts. Moving on within Chapter 2B, and again, we're still talking, regulatory signs. So we're going to talk a little bit about parking, standing, stopping signs, and then also some pedestrian signs. So we've got one section that is in our Ohio Supplement, that's 2B53, and then a few other slides we're going to look at as well. So parking, standing, and stopping signs, and this just gets into some of the signage associated with those issues. And really, I highlighted a little bit of information here about just this breaks down the differences between the terms standing and stopping, which is, until I dug a little deeper, wasn't really aware of, but this lays all that out. And so again, if this is maybe a little piece of trivia that you could wow some of your friends with, to understand the difference between standing and stopping and what the interpretation is, at least when it comes to traffic control devices. Moving on, 2B53, this one is in the Ohio Supplement. And the reason being is that ORC, Ohio Revised Code, has some specific requirements for fines associated if there is the reserved parking for handicap spaces. There's some specific requirements for fines. So we have a Ohio specific sign, and we address that in this section. 2B54 and 57, just pulled both of these in to one slide. And the emphasis point here, I just wanted to point out that, when you're talking about your parking type signs, that they're, obviously very dependent on the appropriate visibility. Sometimes when you're in, very busy, densely populated urban areas, can be problematic to get these signs out there and make sure that they're visible to the people that need to be seeing them. So you definitely need to be thinking about some of that when you're, installing some of these signs. Moving on, 2B58. This is the traffic signal actuation, and this just shows, the bottom of the slide here just shows some of the standard signs associated with that. And then I'm moving on here. Just want to point out that there has been a change with this new manual when it comes to the use, the sign that's intended to be used for your RRFB applications. So it used to be the sign on the right-hand side here of the slide, and the new sign is now on basically the middle of the slide. Same sign code, but the design of the sign has changed slightly, and the legend of the sign. Moving on, getting into traffic signals and then some of your road closed, weight limit type signs. We've got 4 sections here that are part of the Ohio Supplement, and then there's a couple others that we'll take a quick look at with some slides. In 2B59, this particular section, it's in the Ohio Supplement, and again, you know, the reasoning for that is the right of way of pedestrians and how the ORC handles that, and the fact that, you know, in our state at least, we would not be using the stop signs, we'd be using yield signs. And then also another thing that was added to this section, we added this paragraph 13A here, right here, and it, you know, this is a sign that we wanted to specifically call out that in cases where we've got flashing yellow arrows at our signals, we want this sign to be installed at that signal location for a minimum of 5 years. That's just because, you know, as more and more of these flashing yellow sign or signal locations are out in the field, we want to make sure that the signage goes along with them, because it's still a relatively new thing that's being done here in Ohio. Another change that I want to point out, and to a sign between old and new, is this one here is showing the signage at pedestrian hybrid beacons. And so the right-hand sign is the new sign, the one that we are supposed to be using now based off the information in the new manual. The one with the red X through right here, this is the old sign that was part of the interpretation with associated with the previous manual. So just make sure that you know, on these types of installs that you're getting that appropriate sign out there. This slide, looking at 2B60 and 2B61, really just pointing out here that we've got this, the use cases for the no turn on red with the symbol and without the symbol, and kind of when each of those is intended to be used. Excuse me. And then also here on the left-hand part of the slide, just pointing out real quick that if you look back at the previous manual, these signs did not change, but what did change is the sign code associated with them. For some reason, these were flip-flopped between the previous manual and the new manual. So just something to be aware of. 2B63, this is also Ohio Supplement content, and this one gets into the Ohio specific sign that we have for use when you've got high water situations. And again, you know, for more detailed information on these Ohio specific signs, we want to direct everybody to, you know, make sure that you're checking those out in our SDMM. Also in section 2B64 gets into the weight limit signs, and this is important. This, you know, it's in the Ohio Supplement, and this particular sign is a new sign. It's an Ohio-specific sign. So, we had, based on some feedback with our colleagues at FHWA, we had to work through, make sure that we provided a sign that met their requirements. So this is the sign that we ended up with as far as Ohio specific for weight limit. So if you've got to post structures, that type of thing, you need to be aware that there is a slightly different sign, and we're going to look at that. We're going to take a little deeper dive into that here. So this particular section 2B64, so this is one of the target compliance requirements, and so basically the requirement is that an additional weight limit sign is added with that advisory distance or directional legend at all of your posted structure locations. And we'll take, got a couple other slides that dive even a little deeper yet on this. So this slide was just looking at, again, and this one actually shows the difference here between the previous Ohio specific sign, which is no longer to be used, and then the new Ohio specific sign. So the actual requirement of the target compliance state is that there needs to be a sign at the structure, giving the information of the weight restrictions, and then also an additional sign. That's the new requirement. Ohio, we have been, obviously we've been posting, providing signage right at the structure for quite some time, but the new manual did require that additional advisory signage. And again, the compliance date here is 2029. So this is one of the few areas where there is a specific date that these updates need to be made. So if you happen to be somebody that is involved with the placement, the planning of sign updates in your jurisdiction, you need to be keeping this on your radar. And this slide this comes from the TEM. We've got some additional information. We provided some guidance information for our ODOT folks as to how we want to try to approach this, and it gives a example figure of the signage involved. And the thing to point out here is that we actually go a little bit over and above what the manual requires. I mean, the manual only requires one advanced sign. We actually are showing 2, recommending 2, just so that allows the drivers to have a little bit more advanced information to be able to avoid that particular posted structure. Moving on here in section 2B65, so we're talking about way station signs. This one also in the Ohio Supplement, and just showing the differences here. So the federal sign is here. We're not going to be using that. We instead have 2 Ohio specific signs, which are here. Some additional regulatory signs that we'll talk about real quick, and 3 of them are actually, 3 of these sections show up in the Ohio Supplement. So we'll be taking a look at those as well. So photo enforced signs. So this one's, it's not in the Ohio Supplement, but there has been a little bit of new information added into this section of the MUTCD. Just wanted to point this out, for folks. Ohio, I mean, you've got to be careful on the use of these, and I'm not going to take too much of a deeper dive there, but we do have some additional information for you in our TEM in 201-14, section 201-14 of the TEM. 2B71, this section is in the Ohio Supplement, and this just talks about the move over sign that we have developed. There was some Ohio Revised Code language that kind of guided or that we used in developing this sign, just to make sure we met the intent of that Ohio Revised Code language. So this section addresses that, and it's also, the sign itself is showing up in figure 2B33 within the Ohio Supplement as well. Similarly, the no handheld phones. So, in our state, again, this sign was developed, based on, we tried to, utilizing the language that was in the Ohio Revised Code. This sign was developed, and this is the, what is to be used here in Ohio if this sign is applicable. And again, our TM provides some additional information on the use cases for this sign. And also here, this is the last of this section 2B, and this, another one, again, just the reason this is in the Ohio Supplement is just that we have a Ohio specific sign that addresses this instead of using the standard federal sign. So this just points that sign out and provides the ORC reference for the background on the use of this sign. Moving on into Chapter 2C, so we are starting to make some progress here. So we're getting into warning signs. So this first section, I got slides on all of these subcategories here, because it gets into some of the kind of the important foundational information about these warning signs. So here, just taking a quick look at 2C01 and 2C02, and again, just highlighting the emphasis, and again, throughout the whole entire manual, there's a ton of emphasis on the use, the appropriate use of engineering study and engineering judgment. Additionally here, wanted to point out, and this, nothing's changed here, but your typical warning signs, black legends and borders on a yellow background, with the exception being that when you're talking in a school zone, you got a black legend and border on a fluorescent yellow-green background. So there is that distinction between your warning type signs. Here, just similar to the section 2B at the beginning of 2C, you've got this table of sizes, the different type sizes based on your uses, the types of roadways that these signs are going to be placed on. So again, a very good reference resource. And again, the Ohio Supplement, we did not pull any of these tables over into the Ohio Supplement. So just to be aware of that. This slide here, wanted to pull this one in, not in the Ohio Supplement, but it is important to point out that this one, this table, I've got the new MUTCD table, it's 2C-3. It's on the left-hand side of your screen here. And then on the right-hand side is the old, the previous table in the previous manual. And the thing to point out here, there's been some pretty significant changes to this table with regard to the use, and in particular, like I circled here, so in your stop condition, these distances have all increased, so again, this goes back to kind of, just don't, make sure when you're evaluating the placement of these warning signs that you're checking it against these updated guidelines and not just replacing in kind, because the distances, the recommended distances replacement have changed some. And in most cases have, pretty much in all cases have increased. And it's, I circled this column, but there is some impacts all throughout here, so just be aware of that. Moving on, Chapter 2C gets into our horizontal alignment warning signs. So I've got a handful of slides. None of these are Ohio specific content, so they're not in the Ohio Supplement, but a few things I did want to touch on here. This one, Section 2C06, really the big thing here I wanted to point out is, so the table that is in the new manual that gets into the criteria for the use of signage for changes in horizontal alignment. These tables they've completely changed from what was previously in the manual. So it's just, I think it's a little easier, in my opinion, to kind of work through these. So I think it's a good change, but I just want to point that out that it has changed from previous manual. This slide here, this gets into the chevron alignment signs, and what I wanted to point out, this is new in the new manual, that the use of chevron alignment signs is no longer allowable in the central islands of roundabouts. So that was okay with the previous manual, and there's a lot of locations, roundabout locations, that have that. Again, this is not something you have to rush out and immediately rectify, but it is something that you need to be aware of. If you have a project going through, if you're just have scheduled maintenance, that type of thing, you need to be getting rid of these chevron alignment signs. They were just being the concern was just there seemed to be a lot of misuse of those, and the other circulatory roundabout signs just are more appropriate. And like I say, in this manual, this use case has been completely eliminated. Section 2C10, so this gets into your one direction large arrow signs. Nothing too significant that's really changed here, but just again want to point out these, I've seen these in a few cases in your center islands of roundabouts. That was actually not even permitted in the previous manual, but it is something that I've seen on occasion just out driving about. So again, this sign, not something you want to be using in your center islands of roundabouts. Here, this slide I want to talk about just, it's just real quick to show advisory exit, ramp speed type applications. There's several different use cases in this particular figure. I just pulled out one of them. So if you've got this type of application, this is something to be familiar with. And let's see, moving on here, got our vehicle speed feedback signs and plaques. So this is pretty important. This information is completely new in the national MUTCD. Previously, there had been a little bit of, there was some information, but it was just through some interpretation information, and I think a lot of people missed that with the previous manual. So the new manual has pretty much reined this in and kind of is very specific as to the use cases for these vehicle speed feedback signs. So basically what it amounts to is that if you're going to be using the plaque, so this one here, in all cases, if you're going to be using this plaque, you need to have the regulatory speed limit sign up above it, or if it happens to be in a school speed zone, then that school speed zone regulatory sign up above it. And in the case of this standalone sign, the only use case for this standalone sign is to be used at points of horizontal curvature, just to provide, if a speed reduction is needed, just to display driver speed as they approach that change in horizontal alignment. So that's the only two use cases that this section gets into, and then it also is very specific on the color of the sign itself, and then also the message that the variable portion of the sign displays as far as colors and flashing. None of that, change of colors, flashing, none of that is allowable with this. So, if you're a local agency that has some of these, please be aware of this change. And then also, if you're a supplier of signs, make sure that you're aware of these, because in the past there was a big variety of these. It was kind of like the Wild West as far as this particular sign. Excuse me. And this slide just shows a few examples of some of the things that are now prohibited with this new information coming out. So the only thing that is supposed to be displayed is the actual speed, and it's supposed to be in the same color as the background of your sign. So it's supposed to be yellow in this case, and only the speed. So none of the slow down messages. In this case here, this is black on white. That's for regulatory purposes. This is a warning purpose, so this is no longer prohibited. And then similarly here, you've got multiple messages. This is no longer prohibited, or no longer allowed. So, please be aware of this change. I mean, I know these signs are popular with a lot of folks, but there is definitely some concern about, making sure that they're being used consistently, and that, and again, that's the underlying purpose of this MUTCD is the uniformity of use. Moving forward here, going to take a quick look at just one section within the vertical grade warning signs and the roadway geometry warning signs. Just one. We're going to take a look at one section. This one actually has some compliance dates associated. So this is also an important one to be keeping in mind. So low clearance signs, section 2C25. So this one, again, like I said, there are target compliance dates associated with this one. What I've got highlighted here are the two paragraphs that are specifically mentioned in the target compliance date. So, again, if you are responsible for upkeep of your sign inventory in your agency, this information is definitely important for you. And what we're talking about here, so this is the actual language in the target compliance requirements. So it talks about the low clearance signs, being required in advance of the structure, and then the recommended posting of your low clearance overhead signs, and gives the sign codes at your arch type or other structures where you've got significant variance in your clearances across the width of those structures. And the particular signs that these sections refer to are here in this at the bottom of the slide here. So we have already created some guidance information in our TEM to address this. It's in 202-7 and then also figure 29842 of our TEM. So refer there, for additional information on how to meet these requirements as far as target compliance date for this these low clearance signs. Moving on to see, we're going to take a look at the no center line section 2C32. It is in our Ohio Supplement. So we're going to take a look at that next here. 2C32, so this gets into the signage that we have, some Ohio-specific signage for use, typically on our construction projects, just to indicate no edge line, in cases of a resurfacing or replacement of new pavement. We have created this Ohio-specific sign. So this is the reason that this section is over in the Ohio Supplement. Moving on, still in our warning signs section, we have this 2C40, which is part of our Ohio Supplement. We'll take a quick look at that next. And the reason it's in the Ohio Supplement is that the way that Ohio law is written, within the Ohio Revised Code, we don't have provisions for truck speed zones specifically. So because of that, we did away with the use of this warning sign, warning about a upcoming speed zone for trucks. We just don't have that regulatory authority. Moving on here, want to take a quick look at a couple of sections, one of which is not Ohio specific or in our Ohio Supplement. One is, so we'll take a look first at this heavy merge from left, which is a new sign that is part of the new manual. So really the primary reason for this slide, just want to point out that this is a new sign, was not in the previous manual, and this section kind of lays out the use case. Whereas, previously, in a lot of cases, there would be use of the through traffic, keep left sign. And now if you have this, heavy merge situation, this is the sign that has been designated for that type of use case. And if you want to take a deeper dive into that, the MUTCD disposition document, which I referenced way back at the beginning of this session, you can take a look at that, and it talks a little bit more about the use case and the reasoning for that. The next slide here, non-vehicular warning signs. So really the reason that this one is in the Ohio Supplement, again, this goes back to that distinction that Ohio is a yielding state rather than a stop state. So just as part of our supplement, we struck out the indications for the stop here for pedestrians and instead just referred to the yield here. So with that, we are actually up to our next break here. So I got 10:46 on my clock here. So we'll reconvene here in 5 minutes and get back at it in about 10:51 or so. All right, thanks all. We'll be back here shortly. Okay, everyone, we are getting into the home stretch here. I appreciate you, excuse me, hanging with me. And yeah, we've got, hopefully my voice will hold out here for another 45 minutes or so, and we'll power through the rest of these and then have some time here at the end to talk through some questions. So we will get back at it here. All right. So moving on, just want to talk briefly as far as, we're still in the warning signs section. Want to talk briefly about the advisory speed plaques. So section 2C59, we're going to take a look at that with a slide. What I wanted to point out here, so in the previous manual, there were specific signs, separate signs for that were a combination of the change in horizontal alignment with your speed information. These have gone away with the new manual. So what is intended to be used now, is this as the advance sign, and then this would be right at the actual curve itself. So again, just something to be aware of as far as a change between the old and new manual. Chapter 2C, the object markers section, not going to have any specific slides on this. I just threw in pictures of the different types of object markers that these sections talk about. And if you have a use case for these object markers, you can find more information here in these sections. Moving on to 2D, so we're getting into our guide signs, and in this particular case we're talking conventional roads. So a couple sections here I wanted to touch on. 2D03 is first, and it gets into the size of signs. And again, like most of the other previous sections we looked at, these tables are in there. They give some good guidance as far as uses for conventional roads, which is the section we're looking at now. Abbreviations, just threw this slide in here just to kind of illustrate, this section shows some of the words or descriptors that you're not supposed to be abbreviating in your sign legends, and then some that it's okay to provide abbreviations, and in some cases, you may need to fit in the space. Moving on, want to take a look at section 2D11, gets into your route signs, auxiliary plaques, and this is a section that is in the Ohio Supplement. So we'll take a little closer look at that. So in that section 2D11, design of route signs, a reason that this is in the Ohio Supplement is that we have a Ohio specific sign for use for township routes. For some reason, the national MUTCD does not have that. So we had that in our previous manual, and that's remained in our new OMUTCD or Ohio Supplement. Excuse me. Also want to point out that as part of that, so in our previous OMUTCD, we had this Ohio specific county route sign, and with the transition to the new OMUTCD, that Ohio specific sign is gone away. It's no longer in the manual. So if you are a county that has used these, there are a few that we're aware of. Those will need to be transitioned over to the national county route sign, which is over here. So that was just through some coordination with our colleagues at FHWA, and some concerns about having multiple sign types for the same use case. So that's kind of the underlying reason that this sign went away. Also, just to point out here in this particular section, so Ohio, we have our Ohio specific route shield for our state routes. So there's some information in there. And then for a more detailed look at information, our SDMM gives all the dimensional info on the state specific route shields. Moving on to your sign assemblies. So section 2D30 gets into junction assemblies. And here the thing to point out is that the previous manual, we had some language in there about some additional clarification on the use of junction assemblies. And so what we had to kind of change that language a little bit here in our Ohio supplement, but it does provide some additional information as to when these junction assemblies can be can and cannot be omitted. And then it also refers back to another section, 2D29, that gets into a little bit more info. And that's just a snippet from that sections here provided at the bottom of the slide. Moving on, just wanted to put this slide in here. This particular figure, this one is in the Ohio supplement, figure 2D12, and there's actually several different configurations, but just wanted to point out that in our Ohio supplement there were option for these two different sign variations. We essentially just eliminated the one option and opted for this sign that we felt just better represented the roundabout type traffic circulation. Moving on, so chapter 2D, that gets into your destination distance signs. So these, these types of typical signs here, I'm not going to have any specific slides on anything in this section, but if you do need to get into the weeds details on these types of signs, this is where you'd find that information. Chapter 2D, I guess sections, there's a couple of new sections under the street name and parking signs that have been added into the Ohio supplement. Those get into the expressway, street name signs, and then the expressway at grade intersection advance signs. And primarily the reason that they're in the supplement is that there is no substitute. There is nothing in the national manual that addresses this. So we maintained this information that was in the previous Ohio OMUTCD. So we've just moved this information into a new section in the Ohio supplement just to address these types uses on expressways. Similarly, 2D 46.1, kind of the same reason that it's in the Ohio supplement, so all Ohio specific information there. Moving on, a couple other sections that are in the Ohio supplement that we're going to take a look at. We're going to look at way station signing, and we're also going to look at some of the scenic byway signing. We have some state specific info on both of those. So with your way station signing, these two signs here on the left-hand side of the slide are our Ohio specific signs related to way stations, to be used in those scenarios. And then we did make some edits to the text content in that section as well to address that and to talk about the usage of those signs. Section 2D 58, so this gets into byway signs, and there's a lot here. There was a lot of Ohio specific changes here. I don't expect you to, probably not going to be able to read that, but it is, you can take a closer look at that to kind of get into the details there. The next slide kind of illustrates it. Basically what it boils down to is that Ohio we have come up with some Ohio-specific signs for all of the Ohio scenic byways. So the information associated with those is part of the Ohio Supplement, and then we've got these figures that also illustrate the use of those Ohio-specific byway signs. Moving on, guide signs, freeways, and expressways. I mean, obviously this is an extremely important use case. Freeways and expressways, you know, the guide sign usage, but just kind of in the interest of time, I don't have any specific slides here, but this is all of the sections associated with this area. And then moving on further into 2E under the sign design, we'll go back actually to freeways and expressways. So that's what we're talking. Nothing in this first subsection under general, but once we get under sign design, there are a couple slides we're going to take a look at, one of which 2E13 is within our Ohio Supplement document. So here is a look at 2E13, and really the underlying reason for these language adjustments here is the intent here was just to try to kind of simplify the determination of the interline edge spacing compared to how the national manual had things set up. And we had similar type language in the previous MUTCD. This section here, so this is not, an Ohio specific item or anything in the Ohio Supplement, but this is something that wanted to make sure that we emphasized and the previous manual actually even addresses this, but there were still, we still have some occurrences where we have these slash, diagonal arrows, on some of the overhead signs throughout the state. And so this is an emphasis area for us just because, they have led to some, some confusion for motorists. And so we are moving away from any use of these overhead diagonal arrows. So if you're going to use overhead arrows, they need to be directly over top and vertical over top of the lanes that they're assigned to. So just want to make sure that that's something that everybody's aware of, that is something, we realize it's going to result in some bigger sign sizes, but the information, that it provides is valuable information for motorists. So just something we want to make sure is emphasized. Moving on, so this next subsection, this is a big one, guide signs for interchanges. I don't have any specific slides to hit on here, but again, if you have a project or are doing some maintenance or rehab that includes these types of signs, this is where these sections are where you're going to need to go to find that information. Moving on into some of the other guide signs, we are going to take a look at section 2E51. That's our supplemental guide sign section that is within our Ohio Supplement. And in that section 2E51, and I guess I'm hoping everybody has realized and recognized by now, but pretty much any of the slides that are addressing or covering the Ohio Supplement content, I tried to put up at the very top big old letters with yellow highlighting that it's this particular section's Ohio Supplement. So if you happen to be scrolling through these slides at a later date, those will jump out at you. So that was kind of the reason there. But in any case, the reasons for the change here, there's a couple different things going on here. One is we added this language here in paragraph 3, and again, it talks about establishing a policy for supplemental signs, and it refers back to the ODOT TEM manual for additional information on how to go about getting a policy set up for these supplemental type signs. And again, kind of the purpose there is just to avoid that overuse of signs and sign clutter. And then additionally, in this section also, we added in a couple of Ohio-specific signs, which are shown over here. The federal sign is very, very similar, but these there are some slight differences with these Ohio-specific signs. So that's reasoning for that. Moving on, Chapter 2F, that gets into toll road signs. I don't have any detailed slides for any of that information. We have nothing that's in our Ohio Supplement in any of these sections. So we're just going to kind of keep rolling through here. But if you do have, need for this, you at least, have an idea of kind of where to go to look for that information. Similarly, with preferential and managed lane signs, have no slide. We have no Ohio-specific content in any of these sections. And one thing I did want to point out, so in this chapter, it's chapter 2G, so this gets into your preferential managed lanes. Also, it's kind of continuation, but I did want to point out that there are several new sections added here that get into the details of signing for your part-time travel on a shoulder. So, the ODOT terminology that we've been using, for some of the projects we've done here in the state, we've called those either smart lane projects or hard shoulder running projects. But the traffic control criteria for those, that wasn't part of the previous manual. Now there is some information on that particular use case. So definitely something to check out if you have one of those types of projects coming up. Moving on into general info signs. Got a couple slides we're going to look at here. One's an Ohio specific thing that's in our supplement, and one just want to point out a couple things on it. So we'll jump in here. So the jurisdictional boundary sign section 2H02, reason that's in the Ohio manual is that we have a few additional Ohio-specific signs for use when you're, entering, leaving corporations that aren't addressed in the national manual. This is something that was in our previous manual. We just kind of carried this over to the new Ohio supplement. This section 2H14, really just wanted to point this out as providing some info for the appropriate signing for EV charging facilities. Since that's something that's coming on the scene now, there is some new information in this new MUTCD that addresses that, and then this figure kind of gives a illustration of how some of that signing works. Moving on into 2I, that's our general service signs. So got one section here that is in the Ohio supplement. We're going to take a look at 2I02. So here, your general service signs. So the reason we've got some Ohio-specific content here is we added some information about the establishment, local jurisdictions that did want to use these general service signs. They should follow the related standards and guidelines established in Part 2 of the TEM. So again, this is kind of aimed towards just making sure that, to try to minimize the sign clutter issues and have a uniform use of these types of signs. across the state. Moving on here, getting into our specific service signs, and we've got several sections here that are in the Ohio Supplement. And this particular section, so for those of you, that are familiar with the Ohio logo program, and we have, the state contracts out with a third party to administer that program, and this section kind of covers the requirements associated with those types of signs, and we do have some Ohio specific info that we'll take a quick look at here. So first off, in the Ohio Supplement 2J01, and this gets into the eligibility requirements, and again, we, in our case here in Ohio, we utilize the third party Ohio Logos group to administer this for us, but this just kind of lays out our Ohio specific requirements. And then we ended up just kind of getting rid of this mention here of a statewide policy because we already have that in place. So that's the reasoning for the change, or the reason that it's been brought over to the Ohio Supplement. Also, in 2J04, another thing in the Ohio Supplement, we do have some differences here in Ohio with regard to the sizes of these signs. So that's addressed here in this section. It just shows the Ohio specific changes. Also, we have some Ohio specific language. We change this over, we make it a little more stringent from an option over to a standard requirement about the specific service ramp signs and displaying distance. That, it's not an optional condition, it's a requirement. So we just kind of strengthen that a little bit in that particular section. And in section 2J11, we just added some info about some of the intersection signs associated with these logo signs. And then there's a reference for support information, to our tourist-oriented signs, directional signs, which we're going to talk about here shortly. And finally here in 2J12, that section is talking about the signing policy. So again, because Ohio already has a policy in place, we updated our manual, our Ohio Supplement, to reflect that, and just to get rid of some of the information, in the national manual about the policy requirements, because we already have that in place. Now moving over to the tourist-oriented directional signs. So again, these are, this program is also administered by a third party. It's the same company as the logos. But these are called, acronym for us is TODS. And the URL for the third party, the website location is here on this slide. But we do have a couple of Ohio specific pieces, sections that we did pull over into our supplement. And the first one here, so we added this optional language about these TOD signs. They may be used on expressway main roadways. So it's something that National MUTCD doesn't really get into, and so we clarify it here, and then we provide the reference, to where to find more background information. This happens to be in our Ohio Administrative Code, so the OAC. And then, similar to the previous section, this policy section in the manual, we pulled this over to the Ohio Supplement, again, because we already have a policy in place. And so we, didn't have we could basically, we just wanted to reflect that Ohio-specific policy rather than kind of repeating all the national language associated with that. So moving on here, just this next section talks about changeable message signs. I don't have any particular slides in, that address any of these sections. We don't have nothing in the supplement. Just threw up, added a picture here of one of our changeable message signs. This one's over on this is on 670. So one of our first, actually the first smart lane project or temporary use of shoulder type projects. So, all right, moving on here. So we're getting into chapter 2M. So this gets into your recreation, cultural interest type signs. So these are your, typically your white on brown signs that you see out, that are providing information for recreational areas or other areas of cultural interest. So we do have a slide here I want to take a look at with regard to the destination guide signs for recreational and cultural interests. So this slide, and actually this is a pretty important one to point out and just make people aware of, that it's a little bit of a subtle change with how the language in the manual is worded, but it does have, it is pretty impactful as to how, how these types of signs are designed and what we need to do, moving forward. So basically the way that the previous manual read, these signs were, they were set up and most were designed as interchange advance guide signs. So it's this little piece of information I put over here on the top right of the slide. But with the new manual, now there's a requirement that these types of signs are designed as supplemental guide signs. So what that means is that instead of a separate plaque with the exit number associated, now we have to provide that exit number directly, within the sign itself. So what that amounts to is that you're going to end up with larger signs, and so depending on the upsize of those signs, say if you're replacing one of these signs, if you go beyond a certain size, it may no longer work with the type of supports that we have there. So what we ended up doing to address this issue is that we came up with a flow chart to kind of guide people that are working through the replacement of these types of signs. And we tried to kind of balance the usability and the lifespan of all of the components of these sign assemblies. So the flowchart kind of works you through that. It is in our TEM document. It's figure 29849, and then we also address that in TEM 221-8. So again, we tried to kind of strike the balance between making sure that we're meeting the new requirements of the manual while we're also, getting economical use out of existing, facilities. So, that flowchart kind of walks you through that, and that's just, again, kind of a subtle change, but it does have some impacts as far as how these signs are to be designed. Moving on, just this slide shows the different sections of Chapter 2N. So these are all your different emergency management type signs. We got no specific, no Ohio specific information here, but again, just as part of this presentation, I kind of, early on made the decision to at least show everyone, every section that's part of the manual, so that at least you're exposed to it. Maybe if you got a project, or this will ring a bell, that you kind of know at least where to go looking for that information. I questioned myself several times, and maybe made some poor life choices when I made that decision, because it did add some extra slides in here and maybe some extra time. But hopefully this, at least, some folks I feel like probably that are taking this session probably aren't regular users of the manual, so at least I wanted to make sure everybody had some exposure. So moving on here, we are getting into the home stretch here, and we're getting into part 3. So this is our markings section. So looking at part 3, this slide just kind of lays out how all of the different chapters are organized, and we'll kind of work through this as well, and talk through some of the different either notable changes or some of the Ohio specific items with this as well. First off, just some of the general requirements, and we're going to take a look at the maintaining the minimum pavement marking retroreflectivity, and this one is important. I mean, it is one of the target compliance dates, and this is the one that's actually coming the soonest. And the reason being for coming the soonest is that it was released actually as part of a revision with the previous manual, so it has been out there for a while. But this one is coming soon, so definitely one to pay attention to if you are involved with pavement marking upkeep within your agency. Let's see. All right, so moving on here. Looking at the maintaining minimum marking retroreflectivity. So this section lays out all of those requirements, and a couple things to point out. And here at the bottom, I highlighted, up the top here is just some of the criteria as far as the retroreflectivity tolerances or the range that you need to be within based upon the types of roadways. Down here towards the bottom, this does talk about some of the exclusions. So one of the big exclusions is on some of the lower volume roadways. So the threshold that the manual throws out there is 6,000 vehicles per day. So, so less than that, this this isn't a requirement, but it's certainly an option, and in a lot of ways it certainly makes good sense to try to keep this retroreflectivity level on as many of our roadways as possible. But just did want to point out the exceptions that are allowable. And continuing on with that, I just want to talk a little further about it. Like I said, this one's coming up soon. So we're talking September 6th of this year. This method of how agencies are going to approach this and maintaining these minimum retroreflectivity levels that needs to be in place, and so a process to take care of that. Some of the different methods that are allowable, and that information you can find in this document here. You can Google this, and it's mentioned directly in the MUTCD section as well. But some of the different methods that are acceptable, you can go out and actually measure your retroreflectivity of your different routes. Just by getting actual measurements, that's certainly acceptable. There's also a visual inspection at nighttime method that's laid out there. There's a service life method based on a historical data, and there's also a service life method based on, you know, monitoring markings and you know, using that information to establish a program on how you know, the time frames needed to be taking care of those markings. So there's multiple different options, and also did want to point out that there is a research project that our research office is working through, and it's titled Pavement Marking Selection for Local Public Roads. So if you are a local agency, you definitely might be, you know, have some interest in checking out that research and some of the findings there. So moving on into chapter 3B. So this particular section gets into your, you know, your traditional pavement and curb markings. Only have one slide associated with this particular chapter, and it's section 3B03. That's at least showing up on this slide. Actually, in this, pardon me, but this section is a big one, and it goes on. So we do have two sections within our Ohio Supplement. So we'll be touching on both of those. So 3B03, so this gets into no passing zone markings. And the purpose of this additional Ohio specific language is really to provide some additional clarification on the use of no passing zone markings. This information, most of this information comes over from our previous MUTCD. We just incorporated it into this new Ohio Supplement. So most of this is not really new. It's just some additional clarification on, you know, the use of no passing zone markings. Additionally, in section 3B03, we also removed references, you know, to the stop for pedestrian, you know, again, because of that issue we talked about before with how, you know, how Ohio Revised Code is currently written. So just to avoid any confusion, we eliminated, you know, these references to the signage for the stop use case. Moving on, crosswalk markings. So one thing I wanted to point out with this slide, ODOT does have a standard construction drawing that provides more specific details on crosswalks for use on Ohio, on ODOT LET type projects. So that information you can find in TC 74.10 standard construction drawing. So just want to point that out. Don't have any specific slides for this section. Just, you know, be aware of the reference information that is out there currently on our standard drawing. Circular intersection markings. So this gets into your roundabout type markings. We did not have any Ohio specific language here. You know, so I do not have any specific slides to run through on this section, but definitely be aware if you've got roundabout type projects, this is the place to go to find out more info on the appropriate markings for that type of intersection. Similarly here, preferential lane markings. So no Ohio specific information in any of this section. Did want to point out, you know, this 3E04 markings for part-time travel on a shoulder. So this is a new section, you know, kind of tied with what we talked about previously with the part-time travel, the signage associated. So there is some information on pavement markings for these types of facilities. Also, moving on here, we've got another section, 3F. This gets into your toll plaza markings. Again, it's obviously a pretty specific use case. We don't have any Ohio specific language to add here, so we're just using national MUTCD language for this. Similarly with delineators, same thing, no Ohio specific language, but at least, like I said, did want to provide this on a slide just so everybody's exposed and has an idea where to go looking for this information. Colored pavements. So this one, I didn't prep any slides specific to this, but this gets into some of the different type colors that the pavement markings that can be provided. A common one that you see out there currently is your green markings for some of your bike facilities. That's one of the more common ones that's addressed in this section. But this also gets into some of the aesthetic surface treatments like at crosswalks, things like that. Gets into some of the criteria there. So just be aware of that information. Channelizing devices. So this section, like it says, just gets into your channelizing devices and or your tubular markings. So for more info, we are not, we don't have any Ohio specific information. We're just utilizing the national MUTCD information here as well. Also, as a whole, Chapter 3, we had very, very small number of Ohio-specific changes. So for the most part, we are adopting all the language in the national manual, but this section takes a deeper look at your marking and delineators when you get into islands and sidewalk extensions, some of those types of things, for pedestrian protection, vulnerable road user protection. 3K, this gets into rumble strip markings, talks about, the differences, the longitudinal and transverse rumble strip markings. And the distinction here is that, there are pavement markings with the rumbles. If you just have the rumbles alone, that is, it's technically not a traffic control device, just the rumbles. So a traffic control device, and what is addressed here is when you've got, rumbles ground into or created in the pavement in whatever fashion along with the markings. So just to point that out. And with that, we are actually coming to the closing out here. Did want to here at the end provide another link to all of the main resources that you can, where you can go to find more information on this. We've obviously talked a ton about our Ohio Supplement, the national MUTCD. We haven't talked about it a ton, but another resource that is out there at the national level is the Standard Highway Sign Manual. So there's a link to that, and then we've certainly talked some about our Ohio SDMM, where you can get more details on our Ohio specific signs, and then also the previous OMUTCD. So there's hyperlinks that'll take you to all of that content. And with that, we will close things out, and Kara, kind of turn it back to you, and maybe we can talk through some of the questions that have been asked throughout and kind of start working through some of that information. So I appreciate everybody's sticking with me here. I know this has been a long one, but I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so for those of you that have been asking questions throughout, we have been working hard behind the scenes to make sure that all of your answers, questions have been being answered. So I know that there were a couple of questions that were asked towards the beginning of the webinar that I believe your team was thinking that they would like to address possibly more towards the end of the webinar. Jonathan is a little bit more familiar with that, so I'm going to ask Jonathan if he could speak to that a little bit for a sec.
Yeah, so first, I think we got almost every question answered in the chat. If there's anything specific that wasn't answered, you can submit a question now, and anything that's still unaddressed, you can email me. My email is currently on the screen. There's some topics that need some deeper thought to provide a full response to. I did, Karen, I don't know if you saw, for Jeremy Lay, I provided an additional point on his questions about state route markings through villages. I would just review ORC Title 55, which covers a lot of the maintenance responsibilities on who's responsible for the exact components of things on certain roadways within certain jurisdictions.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions that have come in, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask them now, and we'll just go ahead and address them as we can. We have a question asking from Joe Herzog, what is the proper way to reference this now? Is it MUTCD, or is it two different references now, MUTCD and the Ohio Supplement, for updating policy purposes?
Okay, yeah, appreciate that question. And actually, yeah, that was one that we talked about quite a bit in the first training session. But one of the key points we wanted to make people, aware of, and on our Ohio Supplement landing page, we actually talk about this as well. But essentially, what we wanted to do is the use of the term OMUTCD, which is what we've been using for years. We wanted to make sure that it was understood that it is still acceptable to use that term, and if so that term is essentially interchangeable. So if you say OMUTCD, just now that we have transitioned into this new model, it's interchangeable with saying the national MUTCD plus Ohio Supplement, because at the end of the day, the Ohio Supplement plus that national manual, it's still making up our Ohio manual. So we wanted to kind of retain that terminology and make sure that folks understood that it is okay to refer to OMUTCD separate or to the two documents, and basically it's the same meaning. So hopefully that answers that for you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Our next question is from Diana, and she's asking if the signs are different in the MUTCD and SDMM, which governs?
So and beyond just sign, any conflict between ODOT manuals and the MUTCD plus Ohio Supplement, the MUTCD with Ohio Supplement governs over those. Currently, we are working through getting our SDMM up to date and kind of a little behind the scenes of why it takes a little bit extra time. It's kind of a mixture of the feds were up till a couple months ago wrapping up, getting out all the new sign designs out to the states. We at the same time need to make sure we're coordinating updates with our other spec updates and updating the our sign ordering system for our sign shop. So everything kind of aligns and kind of the stars come together. So our goal is to have everything in the SDMM updated this coming July. There may be a straggler or two for January, but it should be in there come July, and they should, between the MUTCD and SDMM, should match by then.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, next question is from Debbie. For overhead lane use signs, if we can't put them overhead near the sign, we would just utilize ground-mounted signs, correct?
Short answer is correct. The sign design would change a little bit because you wouldn't necessarily want the overhead arrows that typically go with those as being ground mounted. So, but there are instances where overhead mounting isn't always feasible, just due to whether there's other obstructions in the way or so forth, where we have to locate sometimes roadside at about that location.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Can a yield sign still be used when a crosswalk is marked on a typical local street?
We're unmuted. We're currently thinking. Kara will address that after the meeting when you send me all the questions. We'll have to think about that a little bit further.
Wonderful, that makes sense. So Brian, we will reach out to you with an answer to that question. Let's see here. Next, we have, could you provide the title of the ongoing research project?
Yeah, and I'll scroll back if I can here. Scroll back a few, find that slide. Let's see, there we go. Yeah, so the name of the research project, pavement marking selection for local public roads in Ohio. So yeah, that definitely check that out with our research office for more information on the findings of that research.
And Kevin, we also have another one that will be published soon. It's the pavement marking degradation data analysis study. We were just trying to create degradation curves for our standard pavement markings. And yeah, that will be published soon. So you can go see that in probably next week. Yeah, that's ODOT.
Wonderful. We do have a couple of people that are speaking about the questions and the answers and whether or not they can see answers or hear answers. So I'll just let y'all know, because since this is a very large webinar, so what happens kind of behind the scenes is when an individual asks a question throughout the webinar, a lot of times we went ahead and just answered that question behind the scenes. A lot of those questions were pertinent to that specific person or their situation, and they just needed a little bit more clarification. So you're not going to see, as an attendee, you're not going to see the questions and answers anywhere that someone else asked and that were answered. The only things that you'll see were the things that we sent out to the entire audience. As far as getting questions and answers, we have a person that is asking if it would be possible to get a copy of all the questions asked and the answers. I'm not sure. I will look into this and see if that is appropriate by the powers to be. If it is, we will share it with attendees when we send out the links and things like that. So I just have to double check and make sure if that's something that we would do or not. So good question. Let's see here. Is there a date? Okay, we're going back to the questions. From Jerry, he says, is there a date that all signs need to be moved back to the new distance?
So, sorry about that.
There is no set date. Sorry about that. We were getting a little feedback. There is no set date, as it's not part of that compliance table that Kevin showed at the start. So it will just be as those signs are due to be replaced, or a road project comes through, that you'll relocate them at that time.
Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, let's see here. Okay, you know what, everyone? We are at the end of our questions. So do any of our presenters have any parting information, or does anyone have any quick questions that they want to get in real quick before we wrap up?
This is, of course, the second kind of in the series of 5. Our next one, I believe, here is in 2 weeks again, which will, our session 3, which will be covering more of the signal, part 4, part 5, and part 8, followed by then, I believe it's our work zone session, and ending with our school zones and bike facilities.
Wonderful. Okay. So let me double check and make sure we didn't have anything else come in. No, it does not look like we did. So we are going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. A big thank you to actually Kevin, Jonathan, and Trace, who are working behind the scenes, the MUTCD team, for working really hard to answer the questions that were being asked. Behind everything that was going on. Just a reminder that the recording and handouts will be headed to your inbox shortly. There were a few people that asked if they could get a copy of the handouts that was used for the presentation that has the highlighted version on it, and the answer is yes. So once I get that, I will go ahead and send that out to everyone so that you will have the highlighted version to reference as you're going back through the presentation. That will be in a PDF format. If you were logged in and present for the full duration of the webinar, you will receive a certificate of attendance within 5 business days. As we close out, a brief survey will appear on your screen, and we'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to fill that out. We look forward to seeing you all back here for session 3. Thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.